Howdy Beetle builders, and this may apply to the Jettas and Audis also to some degree. But while I've got two Beetle Utes here, I wanted to take a moment and show you a couple of different techniques, particularly for the guys that are getting ready to build. Two major differences between the joint from the rear window surround to the rear quarter. And the one we're looking at here, that's fiberglass and then topped with Bondo fill at the joint here. That's one technique for filling that joint. Now keep in mind that this joint, I'm going to show you the other one here in a minute, there's a couple other differences also. But the first one we're going to talk about is the fill in this joint. So this is doing the smooth fill, and if I do this for a customer, I charge them close to $500 more to do this flush and fill. Now, no matter how you do the joint, you can make it flush here, and hopefully it's coming out pretty close flush here. But if you do the fill, it's much more critical that you get it exact, right? And this light colored pearl paint is very telling of any errors. Probably in this light, you can just get a hint of where the line is there. And I body work that for hours, but you can still see it in that pearl paint. Really highlights just a little bit of different angle in the pearl in that paint. And you're like, dang it! But in any case, so difference number one is this is filled. Okay, so step one was panel bond in that seam, and then I shoved it full from both sides, both the front and the back, with Cabasil, epoxy-based resin with Cabasil mixed in, and I, like really mushed it into the crack, both inside and outside, and then winched it down, putting rivets and a couple of bolts through the bottom of the rear window surround and the top of the front bed wall. All right, so there's several bolts in this one is more bolted. The other one I couldn't fit bolts, and I'll show you that difference in a minute. So before I get this all put together in here, I think you can see so that kind of yellowish layer oozing out. That's the well, in here you can see, where's my finger? There it is. There you can see the black stuff. That's panel bond, and then the Cabasil. Right, so as I squished those two layers together, it oozed out, and that way that's filled. I already started doing some paneling on the inside here, so you can't really see back in that corner, so apologies for that. Winch it down, smooth it off, and try to get maybe a 90% fill with the Cabasil. Maybe a little more, but you don't want to overfill with the Cabasil. You want to smooth that back off. And that technique I actually used on both cars. But then what I went and did on this one was Bondo or body filler. I used Fastline, but Bondo's a brand name. But and you sand it off, you fill it again, sand it off, fill it again. And I'm using a block, a long block, to try to get this as smooth as I could on it. It looks really sharp. I really like this technique, but you're gonna add, depending on how good you are with bodywork, you may add 10 hours, but it looks really sharp. Now, depending on the kit you get, your tabs may or may not be long enough. All right, so this one, the tabs weren't quite long enough, so some of this is actually fiberglass fill to try, because I was about a 1/4 inch short here. So I actually made myself a form and filled it with Cabasil, and then sanded it off, block sanding across here with the door open, so I didn't hit the door, to try to get this nice corner there. Here we go. Trying to get this a nice square, because the fiberglass tab, or whatever you want to call this little wing, wasn't quite long enough. Now, I've talked to Mark about that, and besides the fact that he's going to build new molds for the Beetle at some point here, he's getting the guys to trim these longer. So that leaves you the option, and hopefully nobody will run into that anymore, that your tabs aren't quite long enough. I haven't run into one that wasn't long enough at the top. It's always been just at the bottom, and it's purely a function of them trimming the fiberglass when it comes out of the mold. So you probably won't see that anymore unless you've got a kit that you purchased a while ago and haven't used it. Because the next kit's shipping should be long enough so that you don't have to debate on putting a step in here. Now, let's go look at the one with the step. So 2 differences that I can think of offhand. So here's one that's built with the step, right? And all this is the window surround slid further forward. And these are the 2 extremes, making it flush, and then this window surround is pushed as far forward as you possibly can and still have 3/4 of an inch overlap of the bed wall, the forward bed wall, because you need to have it, you know, my gut says 3/4 overlap, right, to secure this to the top of the bed wall. So this one doesn't have much, and of course this one's almost finished, so you really can't see in there. But that's a very narrow depth compared to the car we were just looking at. So on this one, I didn't have room for bolts, so I actually used rivets to sandwich the rear window surround to the forward bed wall. Okay, so difference number 1 is that step. Difference number 2 is how do you do this seam? And again, those 2 are independent of each other. They're not mutually exclusive. So this is the easy, more durable, much less time consuming way to do this seam. I'm not talking about the step now. I'm talking about how that seam is addressed. This is window weld. All right, there it is from 3M. There's other brands that will work. This is kind of a premium one. I like this stuff. It is amazingly durable. I use this also, and Mark recommends, for attaching your caps, the rail caps on the tailgate, etc. Good stuff. That's what this is, this black line. Just like caulking a bathtub, if you want to do it really neat, you can put a piece of masking tape around on each edge, shoot it in with a gun. I like to put a touch of, I wear a glove, and then put a touch of WD-40 on my finger, and just, you know, that way I can get a good feel of getting a nice smear. Of course, if you stop, you'll get a little dink, and you got to do it all in one fell swoop, because wherever you stop, then you're going to have a little mush out. It's just like caulking. That's the max step you can do. That's what it looks like with a step. It's purely, in my opinion, it's all about what look you like. I had done 2 that were flush, so I wanted to try one doing a step, so we did this one with a step. And then this is the cheaper way, easier way, and there is an added benefit to this. This isn't going to crack because this stuff stays flexible. So the body molding it together, like we were looking at the green one, that potentially could crack. And then you have this big crack to deal with. Whereas this stuff isn't going to crack if there's a little flex between these pieces. And even if it does shrink or whatever problem you had, you can scoop that out with a pick, peel it all out, and shoot new goop in there, and you're not having to repaint and do a whole bunch of work. Whereas that style, right, if that ever cracks, which, you know, 5-10 years down the road it probably will, it's going to be a mess to fix. It is fixable, but it's just quite a bit of time. All right, one more thing while we're on the step. So 1,000 different ways to address this, but if you put this step in, then your rail caps are going to come out short, right? They won't quite reach up to the bed wall. You'll have a funny gap right here. So on this particular one, I addressed that with this piece of aluminum angle, right? It's almost the same thickness as the cap, right? And I just, you know, I put a little bit of an angle on there to try to match the angle out here, and that covers up that seam, so you don't have to worry so much about making that seam beautiful. Just an idea, and I actually ended up trimming off about an 1/8 inch here and then I put a spacer underneath this. So this lays flush across the quarters, and this is all bonded with panel bond. And then I put some cheap bed liner over it. Another option to making sure you get sealed between this piece and this piece is I would do the panel bond. I'd recommend that panel bond any way you go. But if you want to go back and seal it, one of my favorite waterproof sealants is 5200. This stuff is sticky, considered permanent. As you can see, they mark it there, permanent. It is for use below the waterline on boats, so you know it seals. It's very messy to use, very sticky, and you get strings of it. It's almost like with cheese on pizza, you know how it strings off as you pull a piece of pizza off. So mask well anything you don't want that stuff on. And I have a lot of clothes that have little strings of 5200 across it. But you can shoot that in to the seam after the panel bond cures to make sure you fill those last few gaps, and then finger it out on the inside or the outside. It is available in black. This is the white. This is more common. And you can get it in small squeeze tubes also. And I also use this stuff when I'm sealing this forward area underneath the bed. It's a little bit expensive. I think it's, you know, I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth, but I think it's around 15 to 20 bucks for one of these. But it's good stuff. Anyway, so step and different ways of doing this joint. This is really easy. Anybody can do that. This is a little bit, maybe not quite varsity level, but I don't know, junior, third year. This is some serious body work to get it coming out looking good. And if you don't get it just right, it can look crappy. But that's the look. You know, if that's what you're after, you can put the time in it. But I have played around with different ways of addressing this seam. So on the gray car, I showed you the piece of angle aluminum. This one, I tried to work the bodywork real nice, and I got a couple little mistakes in here. I may be able to shoot bed liner up and maybe bring it flush with this so bed liner comes up on that surface just a little bit. On the blue one, what I actually did was took some synthetic quarter round and I glued it in, and I did it from this edge inside, right? So it didn't extend past that edge. That worked out real well. Just used some bonding agent or some glue on there and clamped it in, and then painted it to match the body. I think it looked pretty sharp. You could also use cove molding. That looks kind of sharp, and that's available in the synthetic. Here's another idea, and that's cove molding, which just has this little concave to it. Now this is an old banged up piece, but this is really close to what I did on the blue one. And in fact, I think this is my sample. So what I did on the blue one was worked it like that. And this has this little concave to it. And you can tell I pulled this off. It was nailed in the house somewhere, I think. But that's about what I had on the blue one, painted body style, body color. So another idea for addressing this seam to kind of dress it up and keep from having to do so much body work. What you end up having to do to get this to look really well when this is body fill is take a piece of doweling or a curved edge of something, wrap your sandpaper around it, and use that as a sanding guide in there. And really, that's what takes me so long on building one of these. Getting the car built isn't bad. It's the body work. This corner takes quite a bit of time. Of course, the bottom corner down there, all along that seam, you know, getting this, the inside corners are always the hardest. So hopefully I have said something that helps somebody. But that's the two different ways of bonding the rear quarter. And there are others also, but we'll say the style of doing the step or not a step, and then the ways to seal that is to body fill it, and that's what it looks like, or doing the window weld. which is actually how Mark designed it. And this works really well, and it looks pretty clean, and it even looks clean when it's flush. When that's a flush mount and you do this style of seam sealing, and I'm telling you, at least 10 hours. It'll save you at least 10 hours. So, y'all have a good one. Good luck with your builds.